know a guy who's tough but sweet. He's so fine he can't be beat. He's got everything I desire. That summer sun on fire. I want candy. I want candy. Gee, I wonder what we're talking about today. Exactly what I announced, which is going to be candy. Welcome to all of you to Julia Pop Tuesdays, part two, because, part one happened on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday. But we're trying to make 7 o'clock on Tuesday a little bit of destination viewing, hopefully, fingers crossed. As you can see, I still haven't done too many updates. I'm shopping for lights. Let's see. I'm working on a microphone as well. We'll see what I can get put together. I'm basically just kind of working out of my laptop. For a while, I was thinking about a bunch of fancy gadgets and stuff, but those are kind of expensive, and maybe I just want to go with an old school look. So yeah, you'll have at least one more week of me looking very blue because of the blue screen of my Oh, I did it. Oh man, something else. I did it again. My laptop, of course, the lighting comes at me a little bit blue, so I look a little bit blue, but hey, it's my favorite color, so it's fine. Other little housekeeping things before we really get into start talking about candy and all that good stuff is not me not saying because I did go back and watch last week's, and I'm learning a little something about how to be on screen and what to say so that I don't use words and repeat myself too much. So good luck me. Let's see if I can do it a little less. Like I said, I've already caught myself a couple of times doing it wrong. So we'll keep working on that and I will see what I can come up with. So, like I said, those are kind of the fun things. We'll keep it looking sort of old school with this odd lighting as well. We'll see what we can come up with. So, as I mentioned before, we're talking about candy today, and of course, all the pop culture that goes with all the candy. I grabbed a whole bunch of fun things from around the house that maybe I'll show you, and we can have some fun. I created an entire list of different candies. Some of them you guys mentioned in comments when I requested those of you that gave me comments to work with. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. You are indeed welcome to comment in the comments so we can chit chat a little bit. I know right now I don't have any viewers, but hopefully viewers will join us and I will try to keep up. And my favorite part about all of this is the fact that you can always watch this later. So if you're watching this anytime not between 7 and 7:30 tonight, it is a replay, but I still welcome your comments and we will spend the week talking about candy and we'll have some fun with it. So let me make sure all my settings are doing okay. That is also very important. There we go. Everything is set to public. Okay, good deal. So, one of the first candies that was mentioned was Snickers bar. One of the most popular things ever. Of course, my favorite wrestling gets sponsored by Snickers quite a bit. One of my friends, thank you very much, mentioned, that would be Matthew, thank you for mentioning how Snickers used to have visible half peanuts across the top to where you could actually see them through the chocolate of the enrobing of chocolate. And that has changed over the years. It's just kind of crumbled in there and you don't see it quite as obviously as anymore. Still very tasty. Of course, you've got your chocolate, your peanuts, and your nougat. And of course, what people might not realize is candy bars like the Snickers bar were originally sold with the intent of that being your meal for lunch when you were a factory worker. So if you are in a hurry and you almost never got a break anyway, you would get one of those candy bars and it was supposed to be filling. So that's why they had the nuts in it. That's why they had all that sugar in it to get you through a day. So then you'd go home and have a real meal. So with that example, of course, I have about 5 million tins here at the house. So one of the ones that I have is for Goo Goo clusters, which we'll talk about a little bit later too for different reasons. But oftentimes these were advertised as being, hang on, a nourishing lunch. Can you imagine a candy bar, which we look at now as being filled with sugar and filled with things that are bad for you, being considered a nourishing lunch? So the cool thing about this, of course, I have a collection of tins. And so it's really great because they have a whole lot of ads all around. And so you can see many of the ads actually say that it is a nourishing lunch. And I find that quite interesting that that was how they advertised, because truth in advertising, sometimes it's there, sometimes less so much. But there were many candy bars that they would start adding things to, because for a very long time the candy bar was the Hershey bar, and that was it. It's one of the originals, one of the big ones that's still a big seller to do today, which my friend Matthew also mentioned, which was pretty cool. So with that in mind, think about all of the different candies that have come along since the beginning of something as simple as the Hershey bar, which was just chocolate. And of course, part of that too is that is a very American chocolate thing. So if you eat a chocolate bar that is imported from, say, England, Switzerland, anywhere else, the chocolate content, the fat content, the milk content, all of those are very different, and they taste very different. Now, as an American, I love all of the different kinds of chocolate. So other times, UK people, British people, European people will eat American chocolate and think it's absolutely gross because of all the different milk fats and things like that that are in it. But again, enough about that. We want to talk our way through as many fun candies as we can. So the other one mentioned by Matthew was Kit Kat, and he also mentioned how back in the day it wasn't just kind of mushed up unidentifiable stuff in there. It was actual cookie wafers, very thin, slim cookie wafers, and you could see them whenever you broke off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. Again, one of the ones that's part of some really great advertising campaigns. So we still remember Break Me Off a Piece of That Kit Kat bar, because that was such a successful advertising campaign to get you to eat more sweets. He also mentioned Skittles, which, as far as fruity candy is concerned, is a really fun candy. I mean, it's basically just corn syrup that's been hardened and flavored. One gripe that I had about Skittles for a very long time is when they got rid of lime for the green one and gave it green apple. I hated that. Absolutely hated it. And so here recently they have brought back the lime, and I am so happy about that. So I don't know how you feel. Feel free to comment in if you like green apple or if you like lime, whatever team you're on, do tell. So of course, Inger, thank you so much for joining us here. Yes, sometimes for some people, Skittles is indeed death in a bag. The bad things that are in that 100% can be very troublesome for a lot of people. We won't even get started on how much trouble most of this is for people who are diabetic. If there is some other ingredient that causes big problems like cornstarch, it is a big problem. But we're here to discuss some of the fun stuff about it, so I definitely wanted to bring that up. Now, some people think that a healthier kind of chocolate is dark chocolate, and certain ones definitely are. There's so many things out there that people try to talk themselves into thinking that chocolate is okay for you, and in moderation, I suppose it is, but it's very difficult, and we always want to have some reason that it's okay to have chocolate, that it's going to lower your blood pressure, that it's going to make your blood healthier, or some ridiculous thing. But yes, Inger, I do agree with you that people that have problems with corn in any form, I can't imagine what the candy aisle is in that case. But we continue on. And so one of the other ones that was mentioned were Sixlets. Now, if you remember, a lot of people try to compare Sixlets with M&Ms. And so we're going to get into a little bit of an M&M talk, where we talk about those tiny little candy covered items, which is a nice little blend from going from Skittles into the chocolate form of the tiny little candy. And so with those Sixlets, now those were just kind of M&Ms are kind of flattened, but they're round, but they're kind of flattened. Sixlets were spherical, still are probably, and so that they had a different kind of crunch to them. So almost like it was a thicker covering for it, but whatever it was. And so, Kay, thank you for putting that in, how much you like Sixlets. Now, I like Sixlets okay, but I do prefer M&Ms. The one I preferred as a child, which I don't believe is still around, is from Wonka, because back in the 70s when Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, not Charlie and the Chocolate Factory from the book or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory from the newer movie, were called Oompa Loompas, and they were a little bit bigger than an M&M because half of it was chocolate, half of it was peanut butter, and it was all covered in that candy shell. And so I loved those. They were so good, and it's funny because now we have peanut butter M&Ms that came along later. So Oompa Loompas really kind of only lasted from the 70s until about 1982. I was a big fan, obviously, as you can tell with me talking about it. What also happened at Wonka time was there's something called a Scrunch Bar. And basically, what it was chocolate, of course, on the top. It's a standard. And then you had peanut butter and rice inside of it. And it was so good. I really enjoyed it. So, Inger mentions 90% cocoa. So good. Any of them. You only need a little to satisfy. And it's true that just that richness of that 90% chocolate, very, very good. And then I love your point. Sixlets are malted, M&Ms are far superior. So speaking of malted, we talk oftentimes about Whoppers. Whoppers were kind of that malted milk ball, and then they were covered with chocolate. So now, you know that we just got finished with Christmas time, and one of my favorite things to look for is just little stocking stuffers. So let's talk about stocking stuffers that didn't quite make it to the stocking, so they're still here at my house. I'm a big fan of lip balm, and we might do an entire extra show on lip balm itself. But of course, we have food flavored, sweet flavored. And so here we are. We have some Whoppers here. And so I'm going to go ahead and test this out. So first of all, oh yeah, that definitely smells like a malted milk ball covered in chocolate. Like I said, it is indeed a Whopper, as you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and wind it up and try it out. Might as well try it out and see how it is. Not bad, not bad at all. So not a bad way to get a little bit of sweet craving without actually eating the sweets, which we'll get to a little bit later. I do have a couple of sweets here as well. So a couple of the other ones that didn't make it through, I've got a lovely York peppermint patty one. Let's see how it smells at least. I'm not going to mix my treats just yet. Ah, yes, does indeed smell like a York peppermint patty, but and interestingly, instead of being a chocolate shade, it is actually a very pale white shade. So let's try, and then my third one that I want to try, of course, which we've already talked about, Hershey's. It is a classic. It is very simple. Oh yeah, that's definitely a Hershey bar, but interestingly, it is not brown. It is a very pale white. So I find that an interesting choice, and like I said, at some point, maybe I'll try that one later. So, next up, part of the Wonka family back in the 70s when it first came out were something that still going to this very day called Nerds. If you remember the little tiny little, and again, it's more corn syrup problems, I'm sure. So sweetened, flavored corn syrup, but just in a tiny little nugget instead. So those nuggets reminded me of when I was very small, and I did not do enough research on this particular one, but I think they were called Gold Nuggets, and it came in a little bag, almost like a little miner's bag, like a miner 49er, not a young child. So those gold nuggets were like I don't remember if they were chocolate flavored or if they were gum, but the Nerds always remind me of those gold nuggets. And then they also did something called Tart and Tinies. And so the Tart and Tinies were these tiny little the tiny little cylindrical pieces of sugar. Basically, they were like a sweet tart, essentially, but just in a different form. And that's what I find so interesting about so many different kinds of candy. Simply the same candy, just in a different form. It's chocolate, it's nougat, it's peanuts, wrapped up in a different way. So, but yes, Oompa Loompas were my favorite. I think I might agree with you, Inger, that M&Ms are better than Sixlets, but again, to each their own. I do think I'm with you on that. But given the choice, I do pick a peanut butter M&M. Mainly, maybe from nostalgia, maybe I just like that. But I do have many M&M styles that I like. So speaking of, and it being the end of Christmas time, happy 13th day of Christmas, so many times we have little decorative tins, and if you don't know, I have a giant tin collection, not 10, but tin collection. And so most of the ones that I got were M&Ms. So have a look at this little piece of oldness from 1988. And there was actually during voting season where you could vote for plain or peanut M&Ms to win. And as you can see, we had quite a few cute little designs, very patriotic on that one. And then we also had, look at this. We've got a little, let's see, this would be from 1997 because it's probably upside down. Hang on. There we go. So this is my little tin from 1997. Of course, it's made to look like a bit of a fire engine. And then, of course, let's see, we've got another Happy Holidays. Ah, yes, we're staging. We've got some lights, camera action on this one. And, of course, we have our standard red M&M, yellow M&M. Of course, green has made it. Let's see if we can get her on the camera. There she is. And then, of course, Blue acting extra cool, like he's a jazzy fella, because he kind of is. So, yeah, it was very fun that they did little tins like this. And, of course, they were filled with M&Ms, which obviously are all gone from all of those years ago. So I think I'm with you. But I do think that back in the day, I remember having a chocolate lip balm that was in a shade of brown. And I think you're right. I think it would have, like, made the lips look a little bit brown, like maybe you'd been eating too much chocolate. So I think I'm with you. Let's put the flavor of the chocolate in and not worry about adding color to make it look chocolatey. I think I'm with you on that one. So as I mentioned, I've got a ton of other tins. Of course, many Hershey's tins as well. They have quite a few of those. And so I'll just kind of show some of those off as we work our way through our listing. So one of the other favorites that did get mentioned was the classic. So thank you, Karen, for mentioning Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. And something I've noticed about them, and I'm a big fan of them, have been for quite a while, it's actually one of the most popular Halloween choices. So for some reason, the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup is a really popular choice. And what I've noticed recently when I'm at the Quick Trip, which is usually my convenience store of choice, they have been putting so many things inside the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. And of course, pretzels, which is always an interesting choice for adding a pretzel to something chocolatey, so you get your salty and your sweet all mixed up together. They did an interesting one, which they put some potato chips. I was over here thinking it was very unusual to have potato chips and chocolate put together, but still, it's a salty sweet combo. What I discovered about that upon doing a little bit of research is back in 1885, not 1985, 1885, a fellow in Dubuque, Iowa, started making those. He would take crisps or chips, potato chips, and he would dip them in chocolate, let that chocolate cool, and serve it to his family. And so it was so popular with the family, eventually they started selling it in 1949. So yeah, it took them that many years just to decide, hey, let's put these out for sale. And so apparently it was a big deal in North Dakota, Iowa, somewhere up north, and didn't really catch on until much later. And now we're seeing things that are chocolate coated potato chips. So I suppose that works. Maybe not for everybody, but my favorite of the Reese's Peanut Butter Cups stuffed with other stuff is when you put a Reese's Pieces bits inside the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. It's like peanut on peanut on peanut butter on peanut butter. It tasted really good when I tried it, but it seemed a bit like overkill. But hey, whatever you like. There's also like a Reese's Lava, which I have not tried yet, which has like the chocolate, almost like a chocolate syrupy thing. Haven't tried it. If you have, be sure to speak back in. Hi, Kat. Thank you so much for commenting. It looks like you are into chunky bars and cherry mashes. Now, let's take a little side trip about both of those, because chunky bars and cherry mash were actually more regional, more local in nature. So the cherry mash is based out of St. Joseph, Missouri. People that I knew who weren't in the Missouri and Iowa area, most of them had never even heard of a cherry mash. Like, what the heck is that? No idea. But I would explain it to them. Some people thought, okay, that's interesting. Some people thought, ooh, ick, gross. I had a phase where I would eat them and I enjoyed them greatly. Of course, if you don't know what that is, it's the cherry mash is like a cherry flavored nougat. There's usually a little bit of nuts kind of mushed in there too, and then covered in chocolate. So it's for some people. Iowa had a similar one called a Twin Bing. I think the nuts in the Twin Bing were a little bit chunkier, but that was also very popular. When I tell people not from Missouri or Iowa about it, they're like, ooh, gross, weird. But I thought it was pretty good. Like I said, it's not my favorite, but I do enjoy it. Now, there were some other locals that were local to this area. One of them would, if you've ever heard of a Valo milk. So it's like a very milky vanilla marshmallow filling on the inside, but it's shaped like a Reese's peanut butter cup. And so those were very interesting. I'm not 100% sure if they're still around. The other one that was a big one that is a big favorite of mine is the Goo Goo Cluster. I'm going to bring my Goo Goo Cluster Tim back so I can show you. This one was based out of Nashville, and Goo Goo Cluster was oftentimes one of the sponsors of the Grand Ole Opry. So whenever I would listen to it, even in the 70s, they were hosting Grand Ole Opry. And I always wanted a Goo Goo Cluster, but they didn't always have them in this area until Cracker Barrel started carrying them. Ozark Land started carrying them, and I tried my first one further up into my teen to adult years, and I loved it. And anytime I could get a hold of one, I did. Every time I've been to Nashville, I've gone into the Goo Goo Cluster factory, which is, yes, still down in on near Broadway in Nashville. When you walk in, it smells fantastic. It is amazing. So I do love Goo Goo Clusters. They're very similar to a turtle. So they have like the caramel and the nuts and the nougat, and then they're covered in chocolate. So highly recommended on those. And then let's see. Oh yes. And then apparently in Georgia they had something called a pecan log roll. So basically it's just nougat, and then they would put pecans all around it. So I knew very little about it. I think I've maybe tried one at some point. It's not too bad. I tried it while I was in Georgia. And yes, Inger, I agree with you. I like the combo of M&Ms and popcorn. That is something that when I go to the movies, I make sure I buy each. And so what I tend to do at the movies, instead of just pouring the M&Ms in, I'll do a bite of popcorn, followed almost immediately by a couple of M&Ms, and just let it all mix up. And I love that combo as well. There's something about the salty plus sweet that makes it really enjoyable. So yes, I agree to that one as well. Now, we did have somebody mention, we were talking about dark chocolate and how delicious that can be and how it's a little bit healthier than some of the others. Now, one of the ones that were mentioned were Lindor Extra Dark. Now, what Lindor Extra Dark made me think of was I wanted to think about the Posh ads. If you ever remember, like sometimes if you ever see the Lindor ads, they're just so fancy. It's such an elevated advertising, acting like this chocolate is a really big deal. Like maybe it was just handmade by some very fancy looking chef in a fancy looking kitchen, when it was probably just still made in a factory. But they try to elevate that. Advertising tries to do that. I was just watching this last week about how we try to do that with cars. Even when a car is American made, back in the 70s, it had Corinthian leather. Well, the Corinthian leather was made in New Jersey. So those are the kinds of things that I always get a kick out of. And so one of my favorite, which I will post in the next couple of days, is a very like over the top ad from the 1980s, and it was very cloudy and white, and it was an advertisement for Nestle white chocolate bar. And it was just this very beautiful new age ad, a lady walking through the frame with flowing white dress and on a swing as it goes back and forth. And so we're selling chocolate with this. So I'm always entertained by the things that they try to make a little bit fancier in advertising. Of course, chocolate was one of them. So yes, and Kat mentioned penny candies. So that was, for me, the penny candies were more Brach's. Whenever you would go into the grocery store and you would see that whole giant lineup of all the different Brach's candies, and you could scoop them up and put them in a bag. My grandma bought Brach's candies all the time. And so penny candies were always really good. And so Chick-O-Sticks and Bit-O-Honey. Now, I like Bit-O-Honey, but I lost more baby teeth on Bit-O-Honey than probably anywhere else or anyone else. I would lose them on Tootsie Rolls, and I would often lose them on that. And I had tried the Chick-O-Sticks, but something about the flavor did not set me off. I don't know what it was, but for some reason the Chick-O-Sticks were not. So but yes, the Brach's, one of my favorite were the chocolate stars, and so I did really like those quite a bit. I like the orange slices, and it's so funny because when I was a kid, and I didn't try Turkish Delight for a very long time. I tried it like once, wasn't crazy about it. People always joke about how in The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe, the kids, like, why did he think that Turkish Delight was so great that he would just give up his siblings and get everything wrong just because of Turkish Delight? And I always had it in my head, like, Turkish Delight must have tasted like the orange slice, like the Brach's orange slices. Yeah, I was wrong. Totally wrong. It had that kind of gel look to it, But no, not at all. And so, Mom, hi, this is Norma. Hi, Norma. Thank you for commenting as well. The favorite definitely is Hershey's. Again, it's a classic. It is a standby. So with that in mind, and of course, like we said, it is Christmas, and so I did buy some Hershey's Santas. So I'm totally going to eat this lovely little Hershey bar really quick while we're talking about this. And so, of course, it is just a Hershey standard, but they had a little bit of fun with it and put a Santa on it. So I'm gonna kind of eat while I talk. Whoops, I'm making a, a, a social faux pas. Totally fine. And this is absolutely your standard Hershey taste. Um, so speaking of Hershey, what people don't always realize is at certain times there had been just a simple Nestle bar that was just chocolate. Most people remember um, Nestle bars would be Nestle Crunch bars, so they would have rice put in them. Really good, big favorite of mine. So there was the Nestle Crunch bar, which I absolutely loved. Of course, the Hershey version would be Crackle, which not many people would have the full size Crackle bars, but whenever you get the four different flavors of chocolate, where you get Hershey's Mr. Good bar, another one that's just that flat bar, but it has peanuts in it, and then Special Dark was a really big deal. It was not easy to find a full size Special Dark bar. It was possible. I feel like I did it once, but they're not easy to find. Usually they're better in those smaller bits. A lot of times chocolate that dark, you want it in smaller bits too. That's probably why. And oh, Cat's having a Dove Mini. Absolutely. I love it. Now, does the Dove Mini, is that the one that has the little sayings on the inside? If you do have a saying, feel free to type in your saying. And hello, Caitlin. It is so good to see you. Recently reunited with Sassafras. So is Sassafras the flavor, or is Sassafras a type, actual brand name of a candy? Because have not had Sassafras candy in a long time, but I remember enjoying it. I feel like my grandma had it. That was the first time that I ever had it. And when I talk about grandma in candy, I'm usually talking about my grandma Lay. So my dad's mom is the one I'm talking about. And she always had, like I mentioned with the Brock, she always had, at least some kind of Brocks. And sometimes it was just the butterscotch discs, which big fan. Sometimes it was the peppermint disc, especially if it was right around Christmas time. But oftentimes it was the orange candy. And of course, we're talking about grandma's candy dish right now. So some of you might even remember sometimes your grandma would keep those hard candies, those ribbon candies, and then they'd all stick together because they were too old and they were in there. I was not, and that didn't happen at my grandma's house, but it happened at my neighbor Mrs. Hobbs' house. And she'd have that big hard candy. You kind of have to break off a candy to get it. They were okay. They weren't my favorite taste-wise, but they always looked so pretty. Oh, so Kat's giving us our quote. The Dove quote is as follows. You can't hit a home run without a big swing. See, it's so uplifting. Not only are you getting a wonderful dopamine rush with that chocolate that you're getting, but you also get a positive comment. I always love that. Inger mentions the root beer barrels. Also, a whole lot of fun. And of course, just such a cute little barrel shape. And of course, your delicious root beer flavor that went with it. So Caitlin said, hard candy, sassafras. We found them at the candy shop in Kimmswick. And it's so great when you have those discoveries, when you have those moments where you're walking around and there's something that takes you back to your childhood nostalgia, or something brand new that you hadn't even thought of before. So I absolutely love it. So I just noticed that we only have 2 more minutes to go, but I am more than willing to keep this going if y'all are more than willing to keep this conversation going. So I will definitely keep the live feed going for a few minutes more, because I'm so glad you guys are joining me in the conversation. And I'm so glad you guys are bringing up your favorite candies so that we can talk about them, so we can have fun with this. So Kat mentioned, I recently ate a Whorehound candy when I had a sore throat, and it made me feel a lot better. See, candy can make you feel a whole lot better. And of course, what is the song? A spoonful of medicine, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So of course, maybe that's a little bit of what candy can do for us. So of course, we've mentioned a whole bunch about chocolate and only barely touched on the fruity kinds of chocolate. We did mention the orange, we mentioned Skittles, Tartan Tinies, and Nerds. Bottle caps. Now, bottle caps, again, very much like a sweet tart, slightly different, not quite as tart, but Stephen absolutely loves bottle caps, and so they always come in the long cylindrical format, and of course, oftentimes right next to those, you would also have Spree. I actually like Spree better than I like bottle caps because those were just kind of the ones that had the really sweet flavor on the outside and would get tart on the inside. So big fan of those, and of course, I've mentioned sweet tarts. I went through a phase of those and I would kind of chomp on them a little bit instead of just sucking on them. So, but they weren't too bad as well. Now, as a kid, I like trying the new and different, unheard of, brand new advertising bars. So, one of the big ones, I wasn't a big baseball fan, but there was something called the Reggie Bar. And the Reggie Bar was basically a glorified Goo Goo Cluster that just had Reggie Jackson, the baseball player, on it. And I thought they were pretty good. They didn't last the whole way, but they were also pretty good. So Kat mentioned Grandpa loved the old lemon drops that were coated with sugary powder. What was that stuff? Yeah, absolutely. Like it was such a thick powder, you started to wonder if it was just sugar or probably had, some corn syrup thrown in there as well. And then Ingrid mentioned that she also loved bottle caps, saved all the root beer for last. Yep. So you'd always have your favorite flavor. So one of my favorites, though, that goes a little bit away from kind of those dustier candies, what I loved. Lifesavers, big fan. Loved the 5 flavor, the wild cherry, the butter rum. What I always got a kick out of the fact that they named their peppermint, they didn't call it peppermint, they called it pep-o-mint because they were O-shaped. And then what I also thought was funny was that they named spearmint spear-o-mint. There's not an O in spearmint, and yet, you know, Lifesavers came up with a way to do that. So of course, I have 5 billion tins, so of course I've got this one, which was really nice, and of course had Lifesavers in it at Christmas time. And I actually have a 1992 one, very old, limited edition, which of course has some really fun little lifesavery stuff on it. Yes, the Inger mentioned the Lifesaver books. They were called the Christmas Storybook, and you could open them, and it was like either a 5 pack or a 10 pack of your favorite, if it was wild cherry, 5 flavor, or butter rum. Those were the ones that I remember being part of the Christmas book, and that was a big get. Every year it would always be in the stocking, so thank you, Mom, for always making sure that was in the stocking. Those are way harder to find now. I find them, but they're not formatted quite the same way anymore. Kat mentioned in high school I went through a phase eating the Symphony bars. They were made by Hershey's, yes, and so again that was an elevation of the chocolate because it's fancier. So Dove chocolate is fancier, Symphony chocolate bars, and it was still the same chocolate made by the same company. So, but yes, I agree with Caitlin. Lifesavers were underrated indeed. So yes, I completely agree with you on that one as well. So another kind of more fruity version. And again, I lost so many of my baby teeth on so many of the tougher kinds of candy. Tangy Taffy was a big favorite. And what was so funny is they would come in these bars, probably, a few inches long, but you would open it up, and when you would try to bite it, you would pull and pull and pull, and suddenly this like few inches long bar was like 2 feet long. So, and it was so funny. Lewis, thank you for joining us. It's good to see you. Anything chocolate. So yeah, there's definitely a chocolate versus fruity. I like them both. Usually given a choice, I go for the chocolate, but sometimes I'm in a fruity mood and I choose the fruity stuff instead. One of my other favorites that was very stretchy was called a marathon bar. I don't know if you remember, but they were even longer. Like they were about a foot long. And it was just caramel, strips of caramel crisscrossed, and then they put chocolate over it. So there wasn't room for it on the shelf because I did most of my candy shopping at the Five and Dime in Odessa, Missouri. It was called Mattingly's. There's actually a saloon there now. Fun story. My mother used to work there all of those years ago. And so I got to see that candy aisle all the time. And it was funny because they would run out of room of place to put this giant long candy bar, so they would just hang it off to the side. And so I loved those as well, but it was a really huge, long, stretched out bar. And right next to that one was a little something called a pixie stick. Now, if you've seen pixie sticks, they're still around. They're only about so big, right? Well, these were giant pixie sticks. I did a little bit of researching for giant pixie sticks. The giant ones that they have are probably about a foot long. No, no, no. You need to understand what was happening in my childhood. They were, I swear, I have to look this up, 2 feet long, and they weren't just the standard paper tubes. It was like a larger plastic tube, and it was huge. And what was funny is that they didn't have room for that on the candy shelf either, so they'd hang it off to the side. And it was a sugar rush. Like I no, who's what kid is going to finish an entire one of those? Like somebody who's just going to go completely bonkers on sugar. But instead, what I would do, it has a staple at the top. So you'd unstaple the top and then, pour your sugar rush into your mouth and then close it up, and I would restaple it. I would just take a stapler and restaple it and use it again and again. So Kay agrees. Laffy Taffy and Slow Pokes, more of that chewy candy. So of course Laffy Taffy were like the little squares, and they had a joke on them, and so that was a really fun one. Yes, and I think Kat, I agree with you. I think that the Cowpoke was the chocolate taffy that was really hard, and it was on a stick. And they also had Sugar Daddies. Sugar Babies were very similar to that too. Sugar Babies were the little tiny pebble ones, and the Sugar Daddy was on a long stick, just like a cowpoke. Welcome, Linda. It's good to see you too. Yes, and see, I told you. I was talking to Linda this week. She's like, I don't know if you have anything for me. I'm like, we take it back. Like, if there's candy from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way up to now, usually I remember it, and a lot of times we can talk about it. So, Luke, welcome. Your absolute favorite. My absolute favorite is those no brand peanut butter taffies that make an appearance every Halloween. That is a very dividing comment. Some people love them and some people hate them. And it's fabulous that you have found that you love it. I'm not crazy about them. In a pinch, if I really need some sweets, yeah, I will go for it. But not totally my favorite, but I'm glad it's your favorite, because if we were ever out trick-or-treating, I would be glad to give you my orange and black wrapped peanut butters. They are yours every time, Luke, every time. So, and then Inger mentioned pixie straws, the race to see who can finish it first. Yes, absolutely. You would always have that moment of 3, 2, 1, rip it open and see who could finish first, which again, if you want a sugar buzz, that is the easy way to do it. So one other thing that I don't think I've gotten to yet, yes, is gums and mints. Now, a lot of people just use those for breath freshening, but no, I saw that in the candy aisle and I had to try that too. And so, of course, we've got all of the breath freshening stuff like Certs, Tic Tacs, and something that the Dentine Gum Company made was called Dynamints. I had forgotten about those until I started looking. Of course, one of the ways that I get inspiration is I look at my Pinterest board. I had forgotten about Dynamints, and so they're basically just knockoff Tic Tacs. so Kat said we ate a lot of Bazooka Joe. I used to collect the comics, and then of course Inger mentioned zebra striped gum, which was fruit striped gum. Yes, the jokes about it, the flavor only lasting 5 minutes, are thoroughly accurate, 100%. If you did want a fruity candy where it did last a bit longer, what was the one? I know I wrote it down. Juicy Fruit. Juicy Fruit would last a little bit longer than a fruit striped gum. But then, of course, the Wrigley's family, you had spearmint gum, you had double mint gum, really good stuff. My dad really liked spearmint gum and double mint gum. And on a side note, back to the chocolate bars, Dad's favorite candy bar was a Baby Ruth. So I would try to get those for him at Christmas time as well. Kat agrees that the flavor never lasted at any time. But other ones where the flavor did last, I will mention Bubblicious, Hubba Bubba, and Bubble Yum. There was a time in the 70s into the 80s where kids wanted big, giant hunks of bubble gum that were chewy and soft that you could blow into big giant bubbles, because Bazooka was cute and tasty for a little while, but it was harder to blow bubbles with Bazooka. Super easy to blow giant bubbles the size of your head with Bubblicious, Hubba Bubba, and Bubble Yum, and tons of flavors. Strawberry was always my favorite, but they had everything: banana, chocolate, maybe they had chocolate, I don't know, I'll have to check that out. But yes, Inger mentioned cinnamon gum, and that was fun as well. Now, Dentine was probably best known for their cinnamon gum, and they had the tiny little sticks like Trident, usually had spearmint as well as cinnamon and that kind of thing. And so lots of cinnamon flavors as well. Of course, we know Big Red being one of the best known of the cinnamon gums. And so right in that same little aisle, you would sometimes have Blackjack. I never tried it. It's licorice flavored. I've never been a fan of blackjack. Luckily, my husband is, so if I ever come across blackjack, it goes to him. So I don't even bother with it. So Inger mentioned bubblegum and baseball cards, and Kat used to do bubble blowing contest with Double Bubble. Yes, Double Bubble. That was one of the brands that I had forgotten about as well. I think you're probably right that Double Bubble did make the best bubbles. My favorite, I think that I liked the Bubblicious flavors best. Bubblicious strawberry being one of my big time favorites. And then the final one that I had listed on my little list were called chiclets. Now they used to have teeny tiny little chiclets and then kind of regular sized chiclets that were kind of, the size of like a dentine, but they were more square. And they have almost like a candy coating on the outside. And so you'd crunch into them. So they'd have a crunch on the outside, but then once that crunch melted away, it was gum on the inside. And so those flavors lasted a little bit longer than Fruit Stripe. But yeah, Fruit Stripe wins the quickest loss of flavor of any gum ever. Yeah, Inger mentions crunch gum. So there would be like little crunchy bits in the gum too. And so again, lots of fun. Now, the other part of mints, the other mint that I did want to mention that I was a big fan of was called Certs, Certs. And they were just these tiny, cute little mints, and they were very refreshing. And they had, of course, let's go back to advertising for a minute. They had something in them called Retsin. Retsin. What the heck is that? So I actually looked it up. It was invented by the people at Certs, but they wanted to again sell it as something that's going to freshen your breath in the best possible way. And so what it was made of, hang on, I'm even going to put on my glasses so that I know what to read here. Copper glutamate, partially hydrogenated cottonseed oil and flavoring. So whatever those chemicals were that, yes, we were putting into our bodies at this time, gave it that even fresher feeling. Well, apparently the FDA decided that that was not safe to put in your body. So Certs, if it even exists anymore, no longer has Retsin. And then there were similar ones called Clorets. The Clorets branding even had like a cross. Instead of a red cross or a blue cross, it was a gold cross, somehow making it more, medically sound for saving your bad breath or something along those lines. So, yes, I was wondering if Big League Gum was going to get mentioned, and Kat mentioned it. Big League Gum, and of course, it came in a pouch so where it looked like tobacco, like chew tobacco. You'd rip it open just the same way, and it was shredded bubble gum, and that could get a pretty good sized bubble as well. And a lot of times people would just grab as much as they can and just shove and have a mouthful of gum, which was a total disaster. So, and so yes, Kat used to carry them in her purse, the certs. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and like I said, that's why I wanted to spell certs out because I don't know that they even exist anymore. So I wanted to make sure those of you, if it was past your generation, that you knew kind of what I was talking about. And so finally, I've got a couple of other little things. I think we've made it through most of what we've talked about, but I wanted to share what a lot of people might not realize is there is a specific way to open a Hershey's Kiss. And so, of course, I have one of my little Christmas time kisses, and not a lot of people will realize this. So, if you were like me as a kid, you would just kind of pick away at the tin portion, at the foil portion of it. But what you do is you want to put your fingers. Let me show you how I'm putting it. See, the pointy end is there going between the fingers, and I've got my thumb at the base, and then I've got the little pull tab to where you can pull it like that. So I'm holding my hand up like this, trying to give you as best a way to show you kind of what I'm doing here. And then you're going to pull here and then kind of hold your hand down so that you can have this drop into your hand. And so you pull, push with the bottom, push with the top, and pull at the bottom. And then if you're like me, when you're on camera, it drops right out. And poof, it's open. So of course I'm going to eat this one. So Robert, thank you so much for being on this as well. Bubble tape. Yes, bubble tape came just a bit later than all of those other big bubble blowing gums. But of course, the wonder of that was that it was in this little disc shaped thing, and you could just kind of keep pulling it out, just like a measuring tape. And so, if you wanted a little gum, you'd pull out a little. If you wanted a lot of gum, you'd pull out a lot. And just having that little round thing. And what was funny is if you had that round thing in your pocket at school, people would worry that you were bringing tobacco chew into school, and you had to pull it out and go, no, it's not tobacco chew, it's gum, in a very similar way um, to Big League Chew. And so that's pretty much everything that I had. If you guys have any more questions, or if anything else that you guys wanted to bring up, thank you, because we were going to just have this last for 30 minutes, but it looks like we got through a really good conversation in 45 minutes. So we're nearing 7:45, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Oh, but what I want to do is, those of you who have been loyal and sitting here, I want to announce to you what we're going to be doing next week. So next week, big drum roll, here we go. We are going to do, I've named the episode. Of course, this episode was named I Want Candy, and I kicked it off by singing a little bit. If you rewind, you'll see that. And so what I'm doing for next week is, I've named it Chai and I, or Tea and Me. So we are going to talk about chai. We're going to talk about tea, which are I think all chai is tea, but not all tea is chai. And if you don't like tea at all, we can talk to you about coffee. We'll also talk about the coffee shop in general, about how that is a social gathering place, about how Starbucks has kind of taken that world over, about how there are other corporations like Scooters, yeah, so I'm sure that there's a whole bunch of others, which anything I don't know about, I'm going to try to study up on. We'll talk about old kinds of coffee and old coffee ads, as well as tea ads. So we're going to have some fun with that too. So not just the product itself, but as you can tell, I like the advertising part of it too. Because side note about advertising, well, the way I feel about that is it is a mirror on society, but it's a fun house mirror on society. So it twists things around. And so I've always been entertained by that, and all of the not only the psychological element of it, but the social element of it. So we'll talk a little bit about ads as well. But yes, like I said, next week it's going to be Chai and I, or Tea and Me. And we'll talk about all things involving those drinks that we go to the coffee house or the tea house to have. So, Kat says, thank you for sharing your collection of tins with us. How many do you actually have? I have not counted them in a long time, because in fact, I have surrounded myself with all of my candy tins. That doesn't even count all of the cookie tins that I have. So, boy, I don't know, 30 maybe, maybe more. And the reason why is because a lot of these are out because I have Christmas tins that I decorate with. Plus, I have a lot of tins that are in the kitchen that are kind of like kitchen items. I also have a lot of tins here in the magic room. So yeah, if you ever get a chance to visit the house, you'll get a tour of all of the tins. So Inger said, friends in high school used to hide their chew in the bubble tape. Yes. Yep. Yeah, that is one of the things that, oh no, it's just bubble tape. Really, it was chew. I love that. And then Inger also said, I've been to the Celestial Seasoning Plant in Boulder. That sounds like a story. At some point when I see you, I'm going to have to try to remember to ask you to tell me a really good story about that, because that looks amazing. So like I said, you guys, thank you so much for making this a fun time. I hope you will join me next week. Tell your friends. Be sure to like and follow. I am still just here on Facebook Live, but we'll definitely keep continuing to do that. Like I said before, we'll try to keep making improvements as well. So thank you once again, and we will look forward to seeing you every week, including next week at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday. Thanks again, guys. Thank you guys for commenting. That was a lot of fun. We'll see you next time. Bye.